Hey, this is Tyler Franklin with Tidewater Seed. Harvest is wrapped up in a lot of the southern region. There's still a little bit of corn left to harvest in North Carolina and southern Virginia, but there's still a lot of acres in the northern portion of Virginia and up into Maryland, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And pretty much across the board, harvest results have been extremely variable. And typically in one year, we have one big limitation on yield, whether it's drought, disease pressure, whatever it may be. There's always a limiting factor in there that really influences yield. And we look for that number one limiting factor to address for next year in order to improve and get better each year. This year we had two big limiting factors really of equal value. And so we're seeing a spread in a differential in product performance that is exceptionally large. Typically, we'll see a 15 to 20 bushel yield difference from one hybrid to another. This year, it's extremely drastic. It's a lot of 50, 60 bushel yield variances. In some cases, you're going from 0 to 80 and 90. And it's important as we reflect and analyze performance to really understand what those limiting factors are so we can learn and improve and get better each year. A lot of people want to finish harvesting 2024 and just get it over with and move on. But a year like this offers us more opportunities to learn and improve than a good year, because on a good year, a lot of the things that went wrong, a lot of the things that we mismanaged are covered up. On a year like this, it's very blatant and it's in your face, and there's a lot of opportunity in a season like this because we always have chances to learn and get better. And so I want to talk about the two main limiting factors that we had this year, which a lot of people see, but I don't think a lot of people really fully understand why and what to do with that information. The first big limiting factor that influenced the 2024 corn crop all up and down the East Coast was the drought in June. So we pretty much from South Carolina right on up to Pennsylvania on a large scale, we didn't get any rain for the whole month of June. And depending on when corn was planted, that had a huge impact on performance. Some cases it didn't allow for good pollination. If the timing was right, the earlier corn pollinated, the worse it was this year. The later planted corn, the later maturities really had a big advantage. If you had a hybrid that had weak drought tolerance and didn't handle that stress well, it took a nosedive. So we had the drought. That was a big influencer on this year's yield. The other big influencer, I think, was with just as much an equal impact on yields was another water event that occurred in July. When the drought broke, we had too much rain. So we had stress that was caused by lack of water. Then we had an influencer because of too much water that came on and put moisture inside the husk. Again, it boils back to timing. So corn was very susceptible to this type of damage after blister and dent. So those earlier planted acres down south, when they received all that rain in July after the drought, water went inside the husk on hybrids that allowed that and caused sprouting, caused kernel rots, ear diseases. Ultimately, it reduced grain quality. Anytime a kernel shrinks and swells and has disease or sprouts, you lose weight. So yield was pulled off the table because of that water event as well. I had one guy tell me that it's just an awful season, and his particular rep told him that wasn't much variance in hybrids. It was just the season that they face, and that's a bunch of bull, because some hybrids this year have perfect grain quality and some have completely disastrous grain quality. I mean, we're seeing the difference in 3% damage and 60% damage depending on a product. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Husk coverage is a main influencer, but whether that husk is tight or loose will influence it too. So if you've got a short husk that exposes the ear to weather conditions, you can end up with some sprouting. But if it's tight, it won't let air in to dry it out. So if you have a short, tight husk, water can get in, but air can't get in there to dry it out. And that's when you have these really severe cases of kernel damage. And in some cases this year, we're seeing unmarketable grain. So let's say you had a hybrid that had weak drought tolerance, a short, tight husk with a thin pericarp, which is the rain jacket essentially for corn. Your yields were awful in the southern portion of Virginia and North Carolina this year, because you got yield pulled off the top because of the drought, and then you added insult to injury with too much water and lower kernel weight and lower grain quality because of too much rain in July getting in there on that ear. So compare that to a product that had really good drought tolerance with good resistance to that type of sprouting and ear rot and kernel disease. Sometimes we're seeing 100 bushel differences, and it's the difference in making money this year, getting an insurance claim, and maybe losing money this year. And so what I want people to learn from this is that, yeah, it was an extremely stressful season this year across the board, but it was two major influencers. One was lack of water in June, and the other one was too much water in July. We can expect next year, I guarantee next year is going to be different. There will be other stressors at different times. It could be the same two stressors, but at different growth stages. It's important to learn what these stressors are and how they influence you, and manage your risk appropriately. If you had 100% of your corn acres this year in that southern market with weak drought tolerant product that was subject to that ear mold and sprouting, you had an awful season. If you had all your acres with a hybrid that had excellent drought tolerance, that was not subject to that type of kernel weight loss and sprouting and disease, you ended up with a pretty decent crop. And I'm never going to recommend going all one product, but I will always recommend spreading your risk and understanding what those limiting factors are and making your genetic selection appropriately. So I want to highlight 65W75 from the Axis brand that has been a heck of a performer for us this year. This corn that we're looking at right here went through some severe drought. It should be another 3 or 4 feet taller. But 65W handles drought extremely well. And it also has a really thick pericarp, so the skin around each kernel is thick. That protects you against a lot of the kernel damage, a lot of the kernel diseases. And the husk on this hybrid, even though it's a little short, allows air in there to dry it out. So if water does get in there, you can end up with some sprouting down here at the bottom. But water's not going to sit in there and fill up that husk and sit there for days at a time. It's going to dry back out as quick as it can. So you still end up with good quality. You see a little bit of damage here, but compare this to a hybrid that had a tight husk, the whole ear would essentially have rotted. So this is an example of a product that really favored this year. And so next year it might be average, but this has been a big performer for us, and one that I think brings value to a lot of acres, even on years like this. And so the message I want to get across is that you need to understand your limiting factors and spread your risk. And if we can help in any way, help you understand that and make recommendations for you going into 2025, we'd love to help in any way we can. Take care.